Elvis Presley, the singer who shaked, rattled, and rolled his way to rock history in the 1950s, died today in Memphis. He was 42. Presley, whose influence on rock music...
The final love letter written by Elvis Presley before his untimely death has been unearthed, revealing the heart-wrenching emotions of a man grappling with his own mortality. Penned just months before his death, this intimate letter provides a window into the private thoughts of the legendary singer as he faced his darkest hour. But what did Elvis write in his farewell missive, and how will his words change the way we remember the king of rock and roll? As the secrets of Elvis's final days are laid bare, this powerful love letter serves as a touching reminder. Join us to expose the content of the letter. The final summer of Elvis Presley. The summer of 1977 was heavy with silence at Graceland, broken only by the sound of footsteps echoing in the grand halls. Elvis Presley, once the brightest star in the world, was living his last season with a body that felt weak and a heart that carried more weight than anyone could see. To the world, he was still the king, the man who had changed music forever, but behind the closed gates of his beloved home, he was a man caught between memories, regrets, and an aching desire for peace. Elvis's body was no longer the same as the young man who had once danced across stages with lightning energy. The years of performing, the endless tours, the restless nights, and the strain of living in the spotlight had left him exhausted. His weight had increased, his movements slowed, and he often struggled with shortness of breath. Fans noticed the change, but they could never truly know the depth of his suffering. For Elvis, the stage had always been both a gift and a burden. It gave him love from millions, yet it drained the very life he tried to hold on to. That summer, every day seemed like a battle between strength and weakness. Elvis wanted to perform, to give his audience the music that had always defined him, but his health made even simple tasks difficult. He often retreated into the safety of Graceland, surrounded by memories of happier times. The mansion stood as both his castle and his cage. Emotionally, Elvis was carrying wounds that could not be seen. He had known love, yet it had slipped away. His marriage to Priscilla had ended years earlier, but the bond they shared remained strong, a reminder of both joy and heartbreak. He longed for stability, for a love that could quiet the noise of fame, yet it always seemed just out of reach. His last companion, Ginger Alden, was by his side, and though she offered care and comfort, Elvis still carried a deep loneliness. Fame had given him everything, but it had also taken away the simple life he once dreamed of having. At night, Graceland became a world of shadows and silence. While others slept, Elvis would wander through the rooms, his thoughts restless. He often found himself in moments of quiet reflection, pacing the floor with his head bent low, as if searching for answers he could not find. The music that once brought him joy sometimes turned into a reminder of all he had lost. Still, he could not let go of it. There were nights when Elvis sat down to write. These were not songs for the world, but private letters to himself, fragments of his soul poured onto paper. He wrote about his struggles, his longing for love, and his hope for peace. In those late hours, the man who had stood before millions was just one man alone, seeking comfort in words only he could see. Graceland reflected his mood. The once lively home often felt quiet, even somber. Friends and family came and went, but Elvis kept parts of himself hidden, smiling when expected, but carrying silence when no one was looking. His staff saw glimpses of his pain, yet even they could not fully grasp how heavy his heart had become. Fame had given him glory, yet it had left him with shadows that grew darker as the summer moved on. Still, in the middle of his struggles, there was always a part of Elvis that hoped for tomorrow. He spoke of future plans, of new music, of performing again, as if he could fight against the weight pressing down on him. He wanted to keep going, to stay connected with the audience that had always given him strength. But inside, he knew his body was tired. The final summer was filled with contrasts. There were moments when Elvis laughed, surrounded by family, showing flashes of the man who once conquered the world. Then there were moments of silence when he withdrew into himself, his mind heavy with thoughts no one else could hear. He carried both joy and sorrow in equal measure. A man who had lived a life larger than anyone could imagine yet was still searching for something as simple as lasting love and peace. As August approached, the weight of time seemed to grow heavier, the long nights of pacing, the hours spent writing alone, and the constant pull between hope and despair painted a haunting picture. Elvis Presley was nearing the end of his journey, though no one around him could fully grasp it. He was the king to the world, but within Graceland's walls, he was a man with fragile health, a restless heart, and an unspoken longing for more time. Whispers of a hidden letter. In the days and weeks after Elvis Presley's passing in August of 1977, grief filled the air, but so did whispers. Among the many stories told, one stood out, quiet yet powerful, like a secret waiting to be revealed. It was said that before his final breath, Elvis had written a letter that was not for the world, not for his fans, not for history, but for love. The rumor did not spread with noise at first. It came softly, through those who had been close to him, through staff members who had lived within the walls of Graceland, and through friends who had seen him in his last days. They spoke of pages covered in his handwriting, words written late at night when the mansion was silent, words that carried the weight of a man who knew his time was running short. The idea of that letter quickly became more than just a story. It became a mystery that people could not let go of. Some said the letter had been left on a bedside table, folded neatly as if waiting to be found.
It was enormous, spawning a whole generation of imitators and stars in their own right, was pronounced dead on arrival at Baptist Hospital in Memphis.
Others believed it had been hidden away, tucked into a drawer, or slipped between the pages of a book he treasured. The uncertainty only made the whispers louder. No one could say with certainty what the letter contained, but the thought of it alone made hearts ache. The question that haunted everyone was simple. Who was the letter for? Many pointed to Priscilla, the woman who had been by his side through some of his brightest and darkest years. Their marriage had ended, but their connection never truly faded. Elvis often leaned on her for support, and she remained a constant presence in his life. It seemed only natural that if he poured his heart into a final message, it might have been meant for her. Perhaps it was his way of saying what could not be spoken aloud, a confession of love that never truly left him. But then there was Ginger Alden, the woman who had been closest to him in those final months. She was with him at Graceland. She shared his private world, and she was the one he had chosen as his fiancée. To some, it seemed impossible that his last written words would not be for her. A letter for Ginger could have been a promise of a future he longed for but did not live to see, or a farewell written with the tenderness of a man who wanted her to know she was cherished. Yet others wondered if the letter might have been written for someone else entirely. Elvis had known great loves and deep friendships throughout his life. He carried memories of women who had touched his heart, family who had stood beside him, and fans who had given him unwavering devotion. Could the letter have been written not to one person, but as a farewell to them all? Could it have been a message of gratitude, a final attempt to put his emotions into words before the silence of eternity took over? Every possibility made the story more mysterious. The truth was hidden, and no one could fully grasp it. Some swore they had caught glimpses of it, while others believed it was a story created by grief itself. Still, the thought of that letter never faded. It lingered like a song unfinished, like a note left hanging in the air. To this day, the exact words remain locked away. The paper, if it exists, is silent. What Elvis wrote with his own hand has never been fully shared with the world, and that secrecy makes it even more haunting. People imagine what he might have said. Some picture tender words for Priscilla, others a loving farewell to Ginger, and still others believe it was a message for all who had ever cared for him. Despite his fame and fortune, was still a man with a heart that longed to be understood. Whether the letter was hidden in a drawer, lost in time, or guarded as a private treasure, it holds a place in the story of his final days. The mystery of the letter remains, and perhaps it always will. Its words are unknown, but its presence is felt. In the silence of Graceland, in the memories of those who loved him, and in the hearts of millions who still listen to his music, the thought of Elvis's last letter lingers like a soft echo. It is a mystery that keeps the world wondering, a secret that makes his story even more human, and a reminder that even the king had words he kept only for love. Elvis and Priscilla, a love beyond time. When Elvis Presley first met Priscilla Beaulieu in Germany in the late 1950s, the world did not yet know the story that would follow. He was already the rising star, the voice that captured hearts across oceans. But in that moment, he was also a young soldier stationed far from home. She was just a teenager, delicate and shy, with a quiet presence that drew him in. Their meeting seemed almost like fate, the beginning of a connection that would never truly fade, no matter how much time passed or how many storms came their way. From that first spark, their relationship grew into something passionate and complicated. Priscilla was drawn into Elvis's world, a world filled with music, glamour, and endless attention. It was a life few could understand, yet she stepped into it, holding on to her place beside him. For Elvis, she was more than a companion. She was a reminder of something pure and steady in the middle of the chaos that fame always brought. By the time they married in May of 1967, the world celebrated their union like a fairy tale. Pictures of Elvis and Priscilla smiling, hand in hand, filled newspapers and magazines. For fans, it was the perfect story, the king of rock and roll marrying the woman who had captured his heart. Soon after, in February of 1968, their daughter Lisa Marie was born, adding another layer of joy to their lives. Elvis adored his little girl, and Priscilla cherished the family they had built together. But behind the glittering image of happiness, cracks began to form. The pressure of Elvis's career, his long absences, the constant attention from the public, and the temptations that came with fame made their marriage difficult to hold together. Slowly, the distance between them grew, and by the early 1970s, they could no longer ignore it. In 1973, their divorce was finalized. For many, it seemed like the end of their story, but in truth, it was only the end of one chapter. Unlike so many couples who part ways and drift into silence, Elvis and Priscilla held on to something deeper. They were no longer husband and wife, yet they remained bound by respect, affection, and the love they shared for their daughter. Even when their paths separated, they never truly let go of one another. Elvis leaned on Priscilla more than most people knew. She was someone he trusted, someone who understood him beyond fame, beyond legend. They could share moments of honesty when the rest of the world demanded only perfection. For Priscilla, he was not just the king, he was still the man she had met as a teenager, the man who had opened his heart to her long before the world claimed him as its own. In the years after their divorce, their bond became even clearer. They shared in raising Lisa Marie, and Priscilla remained part of Elvis's inner circle. She knew his struggles, his hopes, and his weaknesses. She also knew his tenderness, his longing for love, and his deep desire for connection. Even when he was with others, even when new relationships filled his days, there was a part of him that always carried Priscilla in his heart. This lasting bond is why many believe that Elvis's final letter may have been written, at least in part, with Priscilla in mind. The emotions he poured into his words, the reflections of regret, longing, and love, fit the story of a man who never fully let go of the woman who had once shared his life. Though their marriage had ended, their story had not. For Elvis, love did not simply vanish with signatures on paper. For Priscilla, his presence remained a constant, no matter the distance or time. The sweetness of their connection lies in its endurance. Their relationship was marked by passion, joy, heartbreak, and separation, yet it never collapsed under the weight of it all. Instead, it transformed into something different but equally powerful, by their daughter and by the kind of bond that does not disappear. As Elvis spent his final summer in 1977, it is easy to imagine him thinking of Priscilla, remembering the life they once shared and the love that still lingered. Perhaps as he put pen to paper, as he shaped the words of his last letter, part of his heart was speaking to her. Perhaps the message he left behind was not only for the woman by his side at the end, but also for the woman who had been there from the start, the woman who had seen him not as a legend, but as a man. Elvis and Ginger, the final chapter of love. In the last year of his life, Elvis Presley found comfort in the presence of Ginger Alden, a young woman whose quiet beauty and warmth brought light into his world. Ginger was much younger than Elvis, yet she carried herself with a calm grace that seemed to soften the shadows surrounding him. To Elvis, who was burdened with failing health and the weight of his own legend, she was not only a companion, but a promise of a new beginning, a chance to rewrite the story of his heart. Their relationship blossomed quickly. Elvis, even in his final years, remained a man capable of deep affection, and with Ginger he allowed himself to dream again. He asked her to marry him, sealing their bond with an engagement that filled her with both joy and wonder. For Ginger, it was an overwhelming experience, being chosen by a man who was adored by millions, yet who, in private, wanted nothing more than tenderness, loyalty, and peace. Life at Graceland during those months was a mixture of quiet routines and private moments. Ginger was by his side in the mansion, witnessing not just the public figure that the world idolized, but the private man who longed for stability. She saw the way he cared, the way he still found hope despite the struggles pressing against him. Even when his health weighed him down, Elvis would speak of plans for the future, of things he wanted to do, and of the life he imagined building with her. His words painted pictures of tomorrows that tragically would never come. She was someone he trusted enough to share his final days with. She was there when he dreamed aloud, when he laughed quietly, and when he wrestled with the battles inside himself. Through her eyes, the world later came to know that Elvis still carried a heart full of longing, full of plans, and full of love, even as his body grew weaker. It was Ginger who was with him at Graceland during his very last hours, and it was she who bore the heartbreak of finding him gone. That closeness, that undeniable bond, has led many to believe that if Elvis did indeed write a final letter, it may have been meant for her. A man who had asked for her hand, who had spoken to her of dreams for their life together, might have chosen his last words as a declaration of eternal love for the woman he planned to marry. The mystery deepens here. If the letter was written for Ginger, what did it contain? Was it a promise he could not keep, a farewell he knew she would need, or a confession of feelings too vast for him to express aloud? The thought of that possibility fills the story with both sweetness and sorrow. It leaves the image of Elvis, late at night, pen in hand, writing words of love and hope for Ginger, words that would outlive him and leave behind a question that still lingers. The love between Elvis and Ginger was short-lived in years, yet powerful in its meaning. It gave him comfort at a time when he needed it most, and it gave her memories of tenderness and dreams of what could have been. The letter revealed. Through the years, fragments of Elvis Presley's private life have surfaced in the form of notes, scribbles, and small pieces of writing that reveal more about the man behind the music than any stage performance ever could. They were never meant for the world, yet they carried the weight of his heart. Some were prayers written in moments of weakness, where his faith was his only anchor. Others spoke of his loneliness, of nights when even the noise of fame could not fill the silence inside him. There were times when Elvis wrote about longing, the ache of wanting something more than the life he lived. In those words, one could see a man who had everything and yet still searched for peace. He spoke of regret, of choices that had left scars. Thanks for the people who stood by him, for the fans who lifted him, and for the love that had touched his life. These glimpses into his soul prepare us for the letter that became the most haunting of all, the one written near the end, when his days were numbered, and his thoughts were heavy with finality. If his earlier writings showed fragments of his emotions, the final letter brought them together in one last confession, one last attempt to pour his heart onto paper. The letter itself carried the unmistakable mark of Elvis's hand. The handwriting was strong, yet it trembled in places, as if the weight of what he was writing pressed down on him. Each word seemed deliberate, carefully chosen, carrying more than meaning. It carried the last voice of a man who knew his time was slipping away. The paper, simple and unadorned, became a vessel for feelings that could not be spoken aloud. In those words, Elvis admitted regret. He looked back on his life and saw the mistakes, the moments when he had hurt those he loved, the times when fame had pulled him away from what truly mattered. He did not write with bitterness, but with a quiet acceptance, as though he wished to leave behind honesty rather than perfection. He wanted those who read it to know that behind the crown of the king was a man who stumbled like anyone else, but alongside regret was gratitude. He thanked those who had stood by him, those who had offered him love, even when he struggled to return it fully. His words carried warmth, a reminder that even in his darkest times, he never forgot the kindness shown to him. He was grateful for the family he had, for the daughter who gave him joy, and for the love that had entered his life in many forms. The letter revealed his longing as well. Elvis did not simply want to be remembered as a legend of music, as the man who filled stadiums and broke records. He wanted to be remembered as a man who felt deeply, who loved sincerely, and who carried hopes and dreams like anyone else. He wanted the world, and perhaps one special person, to know that beneath the glittering lights was a heart that beat with tenderness and vulnerability. In the most moving part of the letter, Elvis left a promise. He wrote that love never truly dies, that even when his body was gone, the love he had carried would remain. It would live on in the memories of those he cherished, in the music that would outlast him, like a whisper that continues long after the voice is gone. Reading the letter, one feels the rawness of a man who laid down his crown for a moment and wrote simply as himself. It was not the king of rock and roll who spoke from those pages, but Elvis, the man who laughed, who cried, who stumbled, and who loved. The emotional weight of his words pulls the reader into his final moments, where hope and sadness sit side by side, and where love rises above all else. The mystery of who the letter was for, whether Priscilla, Ginger, or someone else, only deepens its power. The truth is that it carries a universality that touches everyone. It was his last confession, his last offering of love, written in ink but felt in the heart. Through it, Elvis Presley left behind not only music that continues to echo, but also a reminder that even legends are human and that love, once given, lives forever. The letter that never faded. When the final letter of Elvis Presley was discovered, it was as though a hidden door to his soul had been opened. Those closest to him were overcome with emotion. The words on that page were not just ink, they were the heartbeat of a man who had been known by the world as a legend, but remembered by his loved ones as something far more tender. For his family, the letter was almost too much to bear. Tears flowed as memories came rushing back, moments of laughter, moments of pain, and the private times that only they had shared with him. The letter did not read like a farewell from a superstar, but as a whisper from a father, a son, and a man who carried love as his most fragile treasure. Friends who had stood by Elvis through the highs and lows felt the same pull of sorrow and comfort. In those words, they saw the Elvis they had known away from the stage, the man who longed for peace, who cherished the people around him even when the spotlight was too bright to allow him to show it. The discovery of the letter became a moment of reflection, a reminder that his final hours were not only about silence and struggle, but also about love that refused to fade. The letter carried the weight of intimacy, and though it belonged to one, it spoke to many. It told of a man who had lived under the crown of fame, yet sought nothing more than to be remembered for the love he gave. But questions rose like shadows. Did the letter bring closure, or did it deepen the sorrow? For some, it was a gift, proof that even in his last days, Elvis carried warmth and gratitude in his heart. For others, it was a painful reminder of what could never be reclaimed. The mystery of who the letter was written for only added to the ache. It left space for imagination and longing, and perhaps that was why it lingered so powerfully in the minds of those who read about it. More than anything, the letter reshaped how people remembered Elvis's final hours. They were no longer seen only as the tragic end of a great performer, but as the closing chapter of a man who still carried hope and tenderness. His final words showed that behind the legend stood a human being who had walked through loneliness, regret, and faith, yet still chose love as his lasting gift. The mystery of Elvis Presley's final love letter lingers like a soft note in the air, haunting and beautiful. It was more than words. It was his heart, fragile yet full of love, reaching out one last time. His music may forever fill concert halls, radios, and memories, but the letter proved something deeper. Behind the crown of fame stood a man who wanted to be remembered not for glory, but for love. That letter tied his life together, his struggles, his hope, and his tenderness. The king may have left the stage, but his last words of love will echo for eternity, carried gently in the hearts of all who still hear his voice. And now it's time to tell us what's on your mind. How do you feel about the letter? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story so his voice keeps echoing long after the curtains close.